We all have parts within us that help us respond to our environment. So we all have parts that are gonna come forward when we are with our parents, when we're at work, or when we are raising our children. We all have these little parts, these characters, so to speak, that are responding to the world around us. And in today's session, we're going to be looking into those parts, the ones that we are aware of, the ones that we might have inherited and are not aware of, or they don't make sense to us, and the ones that we try and run away from. Hi, welcome in this Inner Parts online session. So just to go in, I don't know if, okay, let me explain inner parts work before we start actually. So inner parts work is similar to IFS, the internal family system. Similar, but I think it's kind of taking it a bit as Richard Schwartz. When Richard Schwartz, he's a psychologist, he developed this as he observed his patients, how they were responding to danger. So he saw these parts that kind of come out in them to help them respond to dangerous situation. Usually those parts were developed during childhood. So if their child had traumatic experiences, they developed this character to help them cope with that situation. So now, we're now adults. We had these parts in us that developed when we were children, when we were in a stressful situation. These parts still carry on to our adulthood, even when the situation or the environment is no longer dangerous, they will still kind of carry through. So, let's do an example with my dollies quickly. So an example of an inner part would be, I have my dollies here. This will be, let's say this is Cindy, right? Cindy developed these three characters in childhood. So these three parts, one of them will be the protective one, the one who protects. And this one will be the strategic one, the one who kind of brings out strategies. And this will be the manager, at least the one who's trying to control the environment around it, to try and manage it. If there's a traumatic event that is happening, this one will first try and come out and protect our client, Cindy, right? Either by like making them block mentally whatever trauma that was. If maybe it was verbal, they would literally make it go past that you don't even hear, like you switch off, and or maybe they protect you by even developing addictions. They're trying to protect you to kind of run away from that situation that might be dangerous. And then the strategic one would come up with strategies and like, how can we make, this is what we need to do, and they might be healthy. Usually they're not healthy. So they would come up with strategies to cope with that traumatic situation that they are under. And the manager would try and manage the outside things. So if someone is literally doing the abusing, so they might try to manage them or to please them in some way, to try and manage the situation that it's not so painful. All of these parts, they're all working for the goodness or the betterness of our client Cindy, right? They are developed, or rather, I like to see them as they are pulled up into center stage because they were needed for the situations. Now, we have a lot other parts, right, that were not needed in this traumatic situation, so they were never pulled out to be in center stage. I hope you're following. So, now we are adults, and Cindy's an adult, and there's no danger, there's no trauma. But these three parts, right, are still running the show, right? How she strategizes or how she protects herself or how she managed the situation is all still what she had to learn previously as a child. Now she's an adult and using strategies of that applies to a dangerous situation in situations that are not dangerous. And she's finding that she's like hitting the wall. She doesn't know like what is happening. Why am I, seem to be getting in conflict, seems to be things that just seems to not working out. Somehow my internal world is not correctly responding or matching my outside world, because the outside world has now changed, but the inside world has been left the same. Now, I hope that did make a bit of sense. Now, that's a very short summary of what inner parts is, right? So we look into these parts, and in a session, let's say in a therapy session, I would look into these parts and look at how do we need to listen to them, or how do we need to, give space to what they had to do and maybe ask them to step down? How do we listen to other parts of us? How do we bring out other parts of us that might be good for this phase of our lives? Right? Just bring another one. Now, the parts of us that we inherited that we haven't been able to use because there was just no time for that. Maybe let's say the part of us that was very artistic, that loved to paint, to draw, to sing, and to do etc., would be left right at the back because there's no space for that. We're in a dangerous situation. This is what's needed, not this. So this is what will come and take precedent. In the hierarchy form, these parts are more important. So they're the one that we're gonna let them rule. So when we do grow, the part of us that is protective will definitely, actually all three of them, will drive us to go in and find security, to make sure that we never ever experience that traumatic event that we experienced. So they will try and run further away from such traumas. Okay, now in our daily lives now, after this example I just gave you, what we need to look into is how do we listen to our inner parts, and what parts have been like taking the center stage and kind of leading our lives, and is that the part of us that we want to be taking center stage? For example, if a part of you that was clearly developed in childhood in response to whatever situation, if you see that you are still carrying that same part, that same ways of responding to any environment, even if it's not dangerous, then it's time for us to acknowledge them and to ask that part to step down, or rather to make the choice to bring other parts that might be helpful in this stage of our lives, right? That's when we kind of turn into inwards to find those inner strength, so to speak, those inner archetypes, those wisdom archetypes. I honestly see parts as some form of archetypes. They're like archetypal parts, right? We are having these parts that can be so resourceful to us, right? Like in this example, that artisty part that might never get to be lived out because it doesn't make sense to maybe these three other parts to bring this, because you went to study or you went to do this, so you wouldn't want to bring such a part. It wouldn't be acceptable in your world or the world that you're responding to. And whether that's true or not, still, we will still forever feel the pain of this part that we have never let them live. And many of us before us, they managed just fine. They managed to put that part of us aside, and they make peace with the fact that right now I have a family, right now I have this. I can't follow this can't follow you, can't follow this dream of yours. I can't follow your mission to be an artist because I have a family to feed. So I have to move forward with these ones. And I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. And their life might end without them ever doing that, and they have made peace with that. But if they haven't, there might be, symptoms of that, of depression, of addictions, uneasiness and anger, etc., that might come out trying to kind of unleash that pressure of this one not living to its potential. Now, if you're at home now, you're trying to connect to your inner world in this way by looking into parts, my first suggestion will be, I was going to say, to be with yourself like you are an outsider, but I know that sounds very vague and not really direct. But I would say you start to listen to those very subtle and quiet voices within that are speaking a very completely different beat, right? Those parts in you that, that you don't really let them come out. And when we start to listen to hear their wisdom or what they want, we can then analyze in our life and see whether or not we can even let that part come in because, of A, B, or Z, because our situation just doesn't allow, right? So we can't actually let that part be. And in that way, we start a relationship with our inner world, right? We start a relationship or in alliances so that our inner world is able to help us cope with our outside environment. And I do want to touch on the parts that we inherit, as I think those hold such big wisdom, and they also hold such big pain because sometimes we carry that also as a part in us. But those are very important to look at as well. And I'll certainly follow up with talking about the parts that were ancestrally gifted to us, whether they're good or not, and how we also work with those. I like to believe that suffering begins when we do not have the resource within, when we don't have a part within to help us cope with our outside situation. But also, suffering continues when there's a part in us that we ignore, that we don't live out or let it live through us because of whatever reason. So we can suffer. And although I honor that, if you literally can't able to fulfill that part's mission or purpose or wishes, at least that you hear it and you let that be something that you're even aware of. That would be a start. Thank you so much for being here with me. This is, a very interesting series that I will be talking more about in a part. But I hope this was a more understanding introduction. I hope it did make a bit of sense. If you're completely new to this kind of work, I hope it did make sense. And till we meet again, we're working again on our inner world and developing that to have a more fruitful, successful life. Because it's about that anyway. And to also have a broader understanding for the world around us, right? Thank you so much. Good.